Brother Eric, that is for sure. Welcome everyone once again to our Thursday night Insightful Conversations. It is a special month in September. We are discussing peace. And as you can see, I'm all decked out. I have a lot of peace clothing, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. I put on my peace scarf. It is the gift of God, peace. And tonight, the subject is building a culture of peace. So I thought about it. I really put some thought into this because what does a culture of peace means? I know when I was a teenager, I've always been seeking peace. And I remember I grew up in Brooklyn. I bought clothing that had peace symbols on it. I had a peace ring. I had peace earrings. I had peace, the peace sign on my shirt. And somehow peace was still elusive to me. And I'm even wearing my peace scarf. And peace is not as elusive to me, but it's not from a scarf. So I looked up the word culture because in my Brooklynese, you say culture is how you say it when you're from Brooklyn. But even though I use the word a lot, culture, I really heard the term culture of peace. So as we know, culture is defined as customs and arts and social institutions of a particular nation or a people or a social group. And humans, though, acquire their culture, if you will, through learning processes and socialization. We're not born, per se, with a cultural template, but it's acquired. And there are universals in all societies. We have music, we have dance, there's religion, there's tools, food, clothing, shelter. Every culture has their own. And there are physical expressions through art and architecture. And then there's the immaterial expressions of culture, politics, mythology, literature, and even science can be considered to be an immaterial part of culture. But rarely do we hear about the culture of peace. And I know, though, that every culture seeks peace. Every language has their own word for peace, shalom, salam, shanti. But it's ironic, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, that the bridge to a culture of peace for all cultures is so elusive for thousands of years. So why are we talking about peace? Well, the UN International Day was yesterday, September 21st, and you've been hearing about this week after week. We focus on that UN International Day of Peace, and it sets a very high bar for values and attitudes that reject violence and prevent conflict by looking into the root causes through dialogue and negotiation. And the UN has been heightened. Our President Biden just did a unprecedented speech before the UN. And I just want to conclude by saying UNESCO said a wonderful statement I just read. The UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organizations, there's that word again, cultural organizations, they assert that since war begins in the minds of men and women, it is in the minds of men and women that the defenses of peace must be constructed. So I have a feeling tonight, as we said, Brother Eric mentioned, is going to be very special because we have a very special presenter. Sister Nalishha Mehta has been working for a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., the root, if you will, of the United States and all that happens in policy. And she's a labor rights activist since 2002, where she advocates for rights of workers around the world. And I asked her, do you focus internationally? And she said yes. And I'm looking forward to hear about what she does. In addition, she's been practicing Raja Yoga meditation for over 36 years. You look too young for 36 years in this life, beginning in the childhood. Okay, that explains it then. Nalishha appreciates the practice of meditation, and it's been a guiding tool for her decision-making, for dealing with stress, combating burnout, and also maintaining a positive perspective despite the challenges, and all of us have these challenges that life presents. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts and a Master's of Arts degree in International Affairs. It's delightful to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and welcome. And I look forward to conversing with you later. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Actually, today I happen to be not in Washington, D.C. I was there this morning, but right now I'm at the Brahma Kumari's Retreat and Learning Center called Peace Village in the Catskill Mountains. So I did a 6-hour drive through the storms to be here. And I am, it's interesting because I'm at a place called Peace Village. And when we're talking about building a culture of peace, it's always been something that we've always sought after. We've always looked for peace. So many people say peace is, at the heart of everything. But what are we talking about when we really talk about a culture of peace? Michelle gave us a beautiful introduction on how all over the world we view culture, but also peace. Just yesterday, I was in the office and this conversation often comes up. Do you think this person that we just hired fits our culture? Do you think that they understand the culture of our organization? And what they're really saying is, do they align with the values of this organization? The values of human rights, the values of equality and justice and freedom. And so it's very interesting because very often when we think about culture, what we're really talking about is values. What we're talking about is having a unified value system. We're having a unified belief system. Because culture doesn't mean that it's same, but that there is a common understanding. And it could be a formalized or an informalized kind of understanding, or a acknowledgement of this is the standards of how we would like to operate. Very often we talk about culture so much in an environment that I work in, and it's very interesting when we talk about culture, what are we really trying to build? It's a common understanding amongst a group of people, but it's also looking at our values. So Michelle shared with you a little bit about my background. So yes, I grew up since childhood practicing Raj Yoga meditation. And something that I had learned through Raj Yoga meditation is really about my values. What is it that I value? But how is it that I also see myself? And so we're going to touch upon that in a moment. But I wanted to share a story with you. So through my work, I'm working with, sorry for these redundancy of words, I work with a lot of workers. And often it's workers who are in conditions where they may not be safe working conditions. They might be getting underpaid, which means also undervalued, but also where women often don't have equal rights because of where they are living or working, they are treated differently. In a lot of instances, not being equal to the men. And so one of the projects I had been working on years ago was on building women's leadership. And I remember I was in Kenya, in a very remote area, kind of rural, with a group of women workers. And we were talking about women's leadership. And the room just was silent. And they were not engaging, they were not talking. And it was kind of a little difficult to move forward with the session because they weren't participating. And every woman sat in that room with their arms crossed and just kind of looked at us. And I was trying to figure out what's going on in this room. And so I said, you know what, let's put the agenda aside and I'm just going to ask a question. And the question was, what are you feeling right now? And one of the women just kind of says, I don't trust anyone in this room. And another woman said, I agree. I don't trust the women in this room. And I said, why? And they said, because we, one, don't know each other, but you're telling me that I can be a leader. If I speak up in my home, my husband will hit me. If I argue with my supervisor at work, he will hit me. I don't trust anyone in this room because I've never trusted anyone. And it was very interesting because then I asked him the question of, well, how do you see yourselves? And they just say, I don't see much of myself, because what I was getting at it and I was trying to understand is, what was it that was important to them? And because they had not experienced peace at home, they endured violence. Even as children, they endured violence in their homes. So when their husbands would hit them, to them, that was just what they thought was an accepted cultural standard. Because they didn't experience peace at home, they didn't experience peace in the workplace, they did not have any trust. But they also could not see their own selves beyond just how others saw them. And so then I said, all right, I'm going to tell you what I see. And they're like, and I said, well, first tell me like about yourself. And they would say, well, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a worker, I work in the factory, I work on the tea plantation, whichever it was. And they could not, and I said, well, tell me more about yourself. What motivates you in these roles? And they just said, nothing. What was happening is they couldn't see who they really were. All they saw was how others viewed them. They didn't know what peace was because all they were experiencing was violence. They couldn't trust anyone in the room because they only saw each other as competition in the workplace, somebody who was their neighbor but also was experiencing violence. And rather than seeing it bring them together, they saw it as, we all deserve it, because that's the culture they grew up in. And so I said, I'm going to introduce you to who you really are. We're going to step aside from our roles, responsibilities, and the perceptions that anyone else has on us. And what we're going to do is I'm going to share with you I'm going to say, what if I were to tell you that who you are is someone loving? What if I were to tell you that who you are is somebody with kindness? As I'm telling you this story, I'm actually reimagining myself sitting in this room, and the room was silent. I said, what if I were to tell you that you are someone with courage? And I just started to bring up these, what we call in a spiritual context, virtues. What we may say in another way, characteristics, values, qualities. As I just said, this is who you are. One woman, I still remember, tears just started coming out of her eyes. And I said, tell me what you're feeling. And she says, no one's ever told me that I have value. So we spent the entire day working through a process of just acknowledging who they really are. It's not about my roles or responsibilities, because what was happening is they didn't have value for themselves because they didn't see anything beyond the perceptions that others had of them. By the end of the day, they were hugging each other, they were laughing, they were talking. like sisters. Because someone finally said to them, this is who you really are. They hadn't experienced peace before. That room was their first experience of real peace because they felt safe, but they also felt heard. Something that they had not been experiencing for a long time. And I brought this story up because often when we think about peace and building a culture of it, we have to remind ourselves that what it really is. Michelle mentioned wars occur because people say it's for the sake of peace. Is that really true? Can we really have peace through violent means? Too often people say, if I could just experience some peace, and they seek it out. Let me go on a vacation to a quiet tropical island. Maybe I'll experience peace. Let me do some charitable work and maybe I'll feel peace in my heart. But what we're missing is really getting to the heart of peace. Because often when we're looking for peace, we look externally. We have an expectation that a group will create a culture of peace. But I myself, my responsibility is actually to first transform myself. I can't expect others to change. I can't expect an organization to change, like we talk about it. I just mentioned my workplace. But I also can't expect there to be peace around me if I myself am not transforming myself from the inside out. So what does it mean to be a being of peace? It means that I'm moving away from negativity. It means that my thoughts aren't violent or negative, free from judgment, criticism, even irritation. I work in a field where change does not happen quickly. I've talked to women who have endured violence through their work. I've spoken with men who have been harassed because of their identity. There's whatever it's sexual or gender identity. I've met with workers who have been ostracized because of their religious choices, pushed away from a community, having to live far away because they're not accepted. And then we ask, when is this going to change? How can I expect someone else to change if I myself am not willing to change? Too often we say, the world needs to change. But who is the world made up of? Individuals. So I myself need to change first. Because if each one of us took responsibility for changing ourselves, then we would be building a culture that's unified, working towards peace. But too often, we're creating negative thoughts that lead to negative words and negative actions. Did you ever think about this? Because in today's world, we talk about climate change and how we can try to save Mother Earth. Did you know thinking negative thoughts is actually a form of air pollution? It actually puts out negative, what we call energy or vibrations into the world, the opposite of peace. And so if I shift my own thoughts, that will allow me to shift the words I speak and the way I interact with others. My example could then inspire others, or maybe at least minimize any form of hostility or any form of escalating angst or anger. Because if you're in an argument with someone, there's no peace happening in that moment. But if one is being hostile and the other one is not, the other one is just being very peaceful, very calm in their words. It's very hard to fight with someone who's not arguing and fighting back. I've just created a peaceful moment. So rather than try to look at building a culture of peace on this grand scale, why not take it minute by minute? What thoughts am I creating right now that are building towards a peaceful environment? What words am I speaking that are building towards a peaceful relationship? What actions am I putting out there or interactions am I doing that is moving towards solution versus more problems? These are all forms of building towards peace. But it starts with me. I can very easily say, well, this person needs to change. They need to change. But I need to look at myself first, don't I? Because even criticizing someone is a form of negativity. In the work I do, we often have to speak about the injustices that occur. Some of my colleagues say, if I don't yell and scream, I won't be heard. I said, if you yell and scream, I'm going to be putting my fingers in my ear because it's too loud. But if I speak from my truth, from the inside out, I'll be heard. Because they won't be so caught up in my yelling and screaming. They'll be more focused on the words that I'm speaking. So I can speak about injustices without escalating into anger. But it's only because if I'm working what I call from the inside out. Who am I? I am peaceful, I'm kind, I'm courageous, I am hopeful. If I work from that foundation, like I said, my words, my interactions will be reflective of it, and that will start building towards a culture of peace. But too often, we are reactive to what happens outside of us. Somebody says something, I get angry. I see something on the news or on social media, and it stirs emotions. Emotions are good. We feel. We're human beings. It's okay to feel. But what I want to avoid is turning into emotional anger. So when we talk about building a culture of peace, we're actually talking about recognizing what matters to me. But it's not on an external basis. It's first connecting to this conversation, like we talk a lot about the Brahma Kumaris. Who am I? Like that example I shared with you of the women in Kenya. They didn't know who they were because all they thought they were was how others had told them they were. But when they actually saw who they were and actually started to understand what that meant, they built a community of peace in that room in just one day. Now, I don't know if it changed things for them, but I do know that they finally heard their own voices and they felt it to be powerful. That power built peace for them in that moment, in that room. That was their culture of peace. And so the question is, well, how do I do this? You know, there's a formula that we often use when we talk about Raja Yoga meditation, where I need to build an awareness around the thoughts I create. And so I need to stop. When I see my thoughts going in the wrong direction, I need to stop in that moment. It's like if you're driving down the road and you see yourself driving away from your destination, do we keep driving in that way? No, we look for the turnoff, the exit, so we can get back on track, so we can reach our destination. Why can't we do that with our thoughts? Oh, I see my thoughts going down the judgmental road. Oh, I see myself becoming more irritated. I see myself starting to create thoughts of arguments. So I can stop, observe those thoughts, but then I need to steer them in a different direction, just like if I was going down the road and I found out that I was going in the wrong direction. I need to turn around or turn the other way. So let me steer my thoughts towards who I really am. Not based on skill, not based on certification or degrees. It's based on who I am. Starting with the words I am. Because we need to hear a new conversation in our minds. Our thoughts have been geared towards hearing the opinions of others so much. Past experience has created a new narrative of how we see ourselves. But why not create some new habits in our thinking? I work with very difficult individuals. And I noticed that when I have had experience where somebody was maybe combative in a conversation or really just disagreeable, the next time I have to meet with them, I'll remember that they were disagreeable and I will start being a little bit more defensive or maybe a little bit more already judgmental. I've already made up my mind how that conversation will go. And then often we battle in words. We disagree. That's not building a relationship of peace. That's actually building towards disharmony. It's almost like war. And I remember that a colleague who I've had disagreements with, who has been very not easy. Let's be real, we're not all easy to deal with. But when I started to shift my attitude to say, I'm a being of peace, you are a being of peace. I am patient, you are patient. In my mind, I'm creating these thoughts. It doesn't mean that individual changed, but what it did change was how I approached them. And when I do that, our conversations are more productive. I don't leave feeling exhausted. And we have built a relationship of peace. I don't need to look at the world for peace. I can look within my own home, my workplace, my community, one-on-one relationships. Those are all opportunities to build a culture of peace. Growing up, the tagline was world peace. We want there to be peace in the world. But did anyone ever say, well, let me look at peace a little bit more locally? Oh, you mean my community? Go more local. You mean my home? Go even more local. Oh, you mean me? What is my behavior? Are my words inspiring or are they creating war? War is conflict. Conflict could be disagreements with anger. You can disagree with someone without creating anger at the same time. Sometimes we're like, how is that possible? Because I speak from truth, not ego. I don't go in with the attitude of I'm right and I must prove them wrong. You hurt me, so I want to tell you how you hurt me so that I cause you hurt. No. Let me speak with understanding, with love, with truth. Everything I'm sharing with you is from personal experience. And because I tend to work a lot, I've had to use a lot of these practices in my workplace. When I'm traveling and I'm out in the middle of a tea plantation or a space where they're doing farming or mining, and talking to workers. Their struggle is real. But what I learned was how they can come together as a community when they start to value themselves and then each other. And it's very interesting. Often I get asked when there's difficult conversations or when we're working, I have to work with another organization. Sometimes they'll say, Nalishha, could you help lead this conversation? And I'm like, why do you ask me to lead it? And they said, because you have a way of reducing conflict. You have a way of making them feel valued. I was like, you can do that too. And they said, I don't know. Every time I talk to them, it just ends with both of us just exhausted and like angry. And they're like, what is it that you do to reduce the conflict? I said, I listen, but I also value them. I show respect, not based on what they do, but based on who they are. And so it is possible to do, but I have to start here. You know, there's been sayings, I think Gandhi had said something along the lines of, and I apologize for not quoting him accurately, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world. I need to be the change. So not only that I want to see in the world, but so that I can inspire others. But not through a lens of I'm doing it for others. I'm doing it because I want to live within this being, within a culture of peace. Because when I'm feeling peaceful, it means my thoughts are more positive, but I'm also feeling energized. I'm also feeling like I can see the world through a clear lens, but with love, with understanding, with compassion. Too often we talk about the wrong things in the world. But how often do we talk about the things that we appreciate, what we value? How often do we show gratitude? But too often the culture has been to criticize, to have conflict, but all in the sake of peace. But it's like, let's get to the foundation. Let's get to the heart of peace. What is at the heart of peace? Love, equality, compassion, appreciation. And so, Michelle, I'm just checking on timing. How am I doing on timing?
You are doing just fine on timing. You can keep going, or we can take questions. You're perfect. You have a lot of time. We still have time.
I would be happy to hear questions.
Okay. So we can, Brother Eric, what is the best way? Is there a way to get questions? I know there's no chat function.
Yeah, there's the question and answer box that seems to be working fairly well. So if anybody wants to type something like in, and maybe you could start it off. Okay. So I just have some comments at first. First of all, thank you so much for this discussion. Because it's funny how I think that I don't want to say mastered this, but I'm on that path. I've always sought peace. In fact, so much so, and I used to say, now I've changed my ways again since I've become a Brahma Kumari, but I said if I had a tombstone, the only thing I wouldn't even want my name on it, I would just want a peace symbol. That's all she wanted. But again, always looking the outside. And again, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I was always looking for world peace. And what I've learned and what you've expressed, which is true, it really is a much smaller world. Like, you know, a lot of times you want to look from a helicopter, the whole world. Actually, for starting with peace, you want to get really, really, really small and see it like an ant, like to yourself. So one word that, you know, almost caught my breath was when you said
like a culture of peace. And again, these are terms, human terms, culture of peace. And I got all these, oh, I'm going to wear a scarf and I'm going to dance and I'm going to sing about, but really I think what really tipped it for me was when you said a relationship of peace, because a culture sometimes can color you a certain way. Even the word culture has its own prism. But the word relationship is a really good word, because that is an interaction. And that's really what, when I think of a spiritual sense, what it is. We're a relationship with ourselves, with others, with God, and it has to start there. And instead of looking at, for me, world peace, I got to work in my own little tiny universe, like you said, work, family, neighbors, and then even when I'm with myself alone, am I at peace with myself? Oftentimes I notice there are times that I'm not at peace with myself. So I'm wondering if there are little signposts we can look for when we're not at peace with ourselves. I mean, I can give my own, I could tell there's a certain uneasiness I have, and I can't even put my finger on it, why I feel uneasy some days, more so than others. So clearly I'm not at peace, and I can't even figure out why. The day is the same, I'm going to work, but there are triggers. And I'm wondering if you can speak to those triggers of what we can look for when we see that we are not at peace. And how to remedy it.
Has anyone ever woken up and just said, I feel off, or I'm just grumpy today? Nothing has happened. They just woke up and was like, I'm in a bad mood. I slept well. Didn't have anything going on at work, like no emails, just I'm grumpy. That's a signal that something is, peace isn't feeling connection. There's no connection. That connection to peace is a little wavering, we'll say. Has anyone ever just been kind of disagreeable? Like if someone said turn right, you're like, I'm going to turn left. If someone said the sky is blue, you'll say, no, it's gray. Like just disagreeable on every sense. That's a signal that there's something feeling unpeaceful. I don't know if that's a word, but just feeling peaceless. Sometimes, it's feeling low energy, like lethargic. The body is exhausted because the mind is exhausted. These are all little signals. And then something else could just be where I used the term abrupt. Like I have impatience in my words with people. Somebody comes to your office and you're like, yeah, whatever. And you just kind of blow them off because you're feeling something internally just brewing. We might call it crankiness. We might call it stress. But what's happening is the body is reacting to what's happening in the mind. Let me ask this question. Like say, for example, your day is done. You've had your dinner. You're sitting on the couch. Do you ever just grab your phone and just start looking at social media, start emailing, start texting? Has anyone tried to just sit without having to do something? Sometimes it's just uncomfortable to sit still because we've trained ourselves, we've created habits of just feeling like we need to be busy. We need to keep ourselves occupied. Especially in the United States, as Americans, we just have built a culture of working hard, working long hours, and also just really keeping the mind constantly going in ways that it just feels chaotic sometimes. And so these are all different signals, because the body is reacting to the mind. Let me ask this other question. What is the first thing you do when your eyes open in the morning? Like you haven't even gotten out of bed yet. Do you reach for your phone to check your emails? Do you look at social media to see what did I miss overnight? That all influences our minds for the rest of the day. But what if I were to say, you know what, for the first 30 minutes of my morning, no technology. I'm gonna go maybe meditate, maybe make a nice breakfast, maybe read something positive or enlightening in a book. If we were just to shift that one behavior in the morning and also the 30 minutes before I go to sleep at night, no technology. It doesn't mean that technology brings us into peacelessness. It's how we are using it that brings us into peacelessness. So what if I were to just shift those 30 minutes, like bookend it? Will I see a change in my day? Because will my mind experience a change that will move me towards experiencing peace? Just something to think about. I don't know if that helps to answer it, Michelle, what you're moving towards.
It does. Actually, two things, just on the heels of that. I know last week we had a discussion, a great live discussion, our first discussion back, and hopefully you enjoyed that, everyone who got to see it live or virtually, the soul of India. And one thing, Gandhi came up a lot, and no one was busy, you know, and I'm listening to you, and you are clearly busy, and my interactions with you over the last few days have shown me how busy you are. I mean, let's look at this. You were in Washington in the morning, you're in Peace Village, you're not relaxing, you're doing a class right now, and I asked you, oh, can you give me, you know, information, and I'm working too. So I also have that dynamic, you know, you're always, you know, ticking off that list. And one thing that came up when I had read about Gandhi, and he was very busy. I mean, he was a leader of the Indian National Democratic Party, very busy, but he always meditated in the morning. And they said, how do you have time? You're so busy. He goes, the busier I am, the more I need to meditate. And that contrast of what we do in America, the busier we are, the less we're likely to meditate because we're too busy. He actually got it right. Meditate first, get your day set. And that's what you talk about. Set your day right. Don't look at social media. So no, I think it was very helpful. Very helpful. And I think I'm going to change some of I'm running off in the morning. I'm going to have to set my clock even back further so I have more time. So I'm not racing through my morning to get on my train. Well, we have a question here, but I can answer that. I used to be in government. I can answer this question. But anyway, Om Shanti, my neighbor plays music every night until 2 or 3 in the morning. How do I feel and experience peace in this situation? Well, I just want to say your neighbor is not a good neighbor in terms of consideration. I don't know where you live because I thought there were some rules of, you know, that you have to enjoy your peace, you know, your home itself. I'm not sure of your, you know, who your neighbor is. That sounds like a conversation to me. But if you would like to answer that question, how do you feel peace in a situation if someone's playing music at 2 to 3 a.m.? I know I can only tell you how I would handle it, but.
So we're going to take ourselves back to Kenya for a moment.
Love that.
So
Please.
When I was, you know, it's interesting. I've had to travel to Kenya a few times for work, and in Nairobi we have a Brahma Kumaris center. It's quite big. Their meditation center is right next to a nightclub. So for those of you who are new to the Brahma Kumaris, one of the routines that many of us have is that we wake up for 4 o'clock in the morning meditation. Guess what time the nightclub is still open till? The nightclub goes on till at least 5 a.m. And I remember meditating, and in the background, you're hearing loud, like party club music going, and you hear the bass. And the first day I said to like the sisters that live there, how do you manage that? They said, well, we tried to talk to them, and they just played their music louder. We tried to be like kind to them by like bringing them sweets, bringing them like, whenever we had a festival or a holiday, we'd bring them a gift. Nothing worked. So they said what we had to do was just practice our meditation. And so it was interesting. The first day I was kind of like sitting in meditation, and I saw myself kind of like moving to the beat of the music, and I was like, oh, this is not good. Because what was happening is I was allowing them to influence me. And so they said, just don't go into meditation expecting to hear the music. Go into meditation with the intention of creating peace. And so after a while, even though the music was playing, it just started to not, it was almost like it was just background sounds. It just stopped bothering. But it was very interesting because it was literally right next door. And I do think over time that nightclub ended up leaving that space. But they tried all the other ways first, and it didn't work. And I was like, wow, maybe I need to get earplugs, because I was like, I need to go to bed, and so it's like you try physical like things that would be practical, like you get like one of those sound machines, you get earplugs, but ultimately it's how do I live in a space where the noise exists but I'm not affected by the noise? And you might say, wow, that takes a lot of discipline and practice. It takes time, but what it is also is because every time I was hearing the music, I was getting angry. So even during the day when I would think about the music, I was getting angry, and the music wasn't even playing because they were all sleeping. And so even when there was no loud music, it was still affecting me in a negative way because I allowed it to influence me. So then I was starting to say, all right, let me shift the way I'm approaching it within myself. I can't get them to turn off the music, but I can at least get it where it no longer affects me. But it put me to the test. I have to say, it wasn't easy in the beginning. I don't know, Michelle.
That's very important that you said that, because a lot of times even you're anticipating the music. It may not even be playing. Oftentimes you have what I call auditory hallucinations. When you're used to it, you get angry. You can actually hear something that's not there out of habit because of the anger. So I love that you have to be very conscious of it. For myself, I would say I would, in kindness, try to empower myself. I would want to feel, this is just to say something to them in kindness. And as you say, sometimes people just don't care, unfortunately, and that's why you have to deal with it. I'm sorry, we have some unfortunate, we're going to turn off the Q&A, if you will. Brother Eric, if you could just turn off the Q&A, please. But anyway, I love what you had talked about with regard to, how to, it's a test for you too. I think oftentimes one thing I've learned studying with Brahma Kumar is everything is a test. What is your reaction to it? Not what they're doing, how do you respond to it? And oftentimes it's maybe something that I need to work on. It comes in front of me when it's there for a reason, because I need to work for it. I also loved your answer to me when you talked about, when I had said to my question about feeling uneasy, to shift that. So that's really, really
really important. So all these things that you talk about, relationship and choice, and starting with yourself. You know, when you look in the mirror, what do you look at? Are you looking at a person of peace? Or are you looking at someone who is shifting? You know, I always say when I'm not at peace, I'm shifting in the wind. You know, you could blow on me and I'm going to blow over. Whereas my feet are planted and I know I'm in a good place. And like you said, the day could be exactly the same, but you wake up, so it's not exactly the same. I am not on. If I have that wavering, I am not on. But the thing is, you know, and I love the expression check and change. You can change, and you can, and everything in this life, except for who you are deep down, is temporary. So as you mentioned about the music, everything is temporary. Any feeling that I have, if I wake up sad, the next day, chances are I'm not going to be sad again. You know, and that's another beautiful thing about this world. Everything is temporary. So anything that bothers me, it's probably going to go away anyway. But again, that peace is wonderful. The story you gave about Kenya, wow. But again, starting small. I wish the governments could hear you. I wonder if you get to speak to them, but in my past life in government, it is oftentimes, and I think the UN touched on it, that culture of war for peace doesn't work. So this has been just wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't know about questions. We've had some problems with our technical difficulties, if you will. So we're going to skip the questions for now. Hopefully we'll have it remedied by next week. I'm wondering, Nalishha, if you would be kind enough to bring us to a meditation so we can work on that piece. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for all of you, for participating. So let's sit comfortably. I'm going to even reposition myself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure your legs are comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Your arms are by your sides or in front of you. You just want to make sure your arms aren't crossed in front of you. Like, just let your arms relax. Allow your head, your neck, and your spine to just kind of align itself. You just want to be in a very naturally comfortable position. And let's just all take a deep breath in and exhale. I'm going to share a few words with you. And I invite you to just follow along. And if you find your thoughts wandering, just be gentle with yourself and bring yourself back to the group. So in this moment, I'm putting aside my roles, my responsibilities. I appreciate the roles and responsibilities that I hold, whatever they may be. Sister, mother, brother, teacher, whatever it may be. I appreciate those roles and responsibilities. But for this moment, let me just put them aside. Let me let go and step into the world within me. It's a world that's so sacred, but I often forget to access it because I get caught up in the world of action. But let me bring the being back into the term human being. In this moment, let me be present. Let me ask myself, who am I? I am a being of peace. I'm a being of courage. I'm a being of hope. I'm a being of benevolence. Let me just sit for a moment. Let me slow down. Not thinking about the past or the future, just this very present moment. If in this moment you were to say the words, I am, what naturally completes that statement for you? Let me get to the heart of who I really am. Let me remind myself that my roles and responsibilities are opportunities to express who I really am. And if I need a space or a place to start, let me start with the words, I am peaceful. And just sit with that thought and allow that thought to grow. Allow that thought to fill you. Allow that thought to be present with you, within you. And let me take another deep breath in and exhale. And let me just appreciate this moment that we as a community have created together. The culture of peace that we have created over the last hour. Om Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you. You have created a community of peace this past half hour. You've done it. You really are quite a facilitator. I hope you come back again and hear more of your wonderful, use the word adventures, but they really are adventures. And it's been a remarkable evening. And I thank you for sharing with us. And I am peace. And I am also grateful for you and for everyone that's joined us tonight, everyone. And thank you again, Nalishha. I hope you come back because I think this is the first I've ever heard you speak, and it really was quite something. I hope everyone agrees. I know everyone agrees. Okay, so now we move to our last week of September, our month of peace, the gift from God. And next week we have someone I'm familiar with. I'm sure you are, Brother Marcelo from Colombia. And he's going to talk about peace as a pathway to success. It is a pathway to success, is it not? As I say, sometimes it's elusive a month, but those on that pathway are always successful. So with that, I thank you all for being here. And I thank you, Brother Eric, for your technological know-how and also for the Supreme Being, without whom we wouldn't be here. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week, and have a wonderful week. Om Shanti, a week of peace and love.
Om Shanti, everyone. Thank you, Michelle. Lovely, Nalishha. Want to hear more about those stories? We should send you to a few other places at this time. I think that would be a very good thing. So may you all have culture, may you all have peace, and may you all create a wonderful culture of peace like our speaker did tonight. Thanks again, Nalishha. Bye-bye, everyone.